Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching Big Picture with me, Vishal, Dahiya, and today we're going to talk about the ongoing tussle between Google and news outlets, specifically the newspapers over sharing of advertising revenue. Now, recently, the Indian Newspaper Society has written to Google asking it to compensate Indian newspapers comprehensively for the use of their content and to share details of its advertising revenues. Now, this comes very close on the heels of the law which has been passed by the Australian Parliament requiring Google and Facebook to pay media companies there for the content. We're going to understand the overall, issue here and also the Indian implications. What exactly are the problems here in the Indian context and how those problems can be tackled further on this particular issue? What is it that the newspaper companies want and what is it that the Google or Facebook can be expected to do? For more on this, we are joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Jayant Mammen Mathew. He is the chairman of the Digital Committee, INS, and executive editor of Malayala Manorama as well. We also have Mr. Prashant, digital policy expert, and Mr. Shekhar, Iyer, senior journalist, is also joining us. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Rajya Sabha TV. Let me begin with you, Mr. Mathew, and let's start with the letter written by INS as well. If you could, take us into the details of what exactly are the issues or the concerns which INS is raising with Google and the overall issue of sharing of advertising revenue here.
Sure. As we all know that newspapers for the past 10, 20 years across the world, there has been a change in the pattern of how the revenue and the business model, starting with the West in the mid-90s when Google first came and disrupted the whole ecosystem. Over the years, advertising revenue has gone to these tech platforms, these big digital tech platforms. And in the past 4 or 5 years, as digital advertising has really eclipsed print advertising across the world, newspapers have seen that advertising revenues have decreased. For newspapers to sort of function and their business model is advertising and cover price. But we see that in the digital space, we are hardly seeing much of advertising revenue from the digital area. Almost 80% of advertising goes to these big tech platforms. Okay. Now, journalism costs a huge amount of money, resources, boots on the ground. And what INS has asked for is primarily 3 points. First, it is our content which provides authenticity on Google and all these big tech platforms. Content costs money. It's our original reporting. It's proprietary content. So that powers these search engines. Two, INS says that publishers should be compensated for much more than right now in terms of advertising revenue. INS has said that we should get at least 85% of advertising revenue. And finally, we say that during the search, credible news site links should come up rather than some obscure site which does not have any credibility. So this is sum and substance of what INS has asked Google.
Okay. Mr. Mathew, you said that INS is asking for at least 85% of the share in the advertising revenue. If you have to understand it better, what exactly is the amount of revenue which is shared with the newspapers right now by Google? Is there any figure there, or is there a formula on which it is calculated?
No, unfortunately, none of the newspapers or the content providers know this. It's the whole advertising ecosystem is extremely opaque. We really have no idea how this works. At the end of the month, we just all newspapers, we just get a consolidated check. We don't know if it's 20%, 30%, 40%, or we don't know if it's even 10%. I mean, we actually have no idea. So we've even asked for some kind of transparency. For example, if you look at it from our point of view, it is our content. It is our content which is giving people, I mean, who come online, they read our content. So that's the reason why people come and see this. But the whole system is extremely opaque. So we have no idea what percentage this constitutes.
Okay, definitely fair enough. The content is obviously belongs to the newspapers and the demands out there. Let me bring in Mr. Shekhar Iyer here. Mr. Iyer, your views on what exactly Mr. Mathew is pointing out here as per the INS letter in terms of what INS is asking Google to do. That's one part. And two, the way the entire system works, as Mr. Mathew just explained, doesn't look like the system is transparent enough, because if the newspapers don't know what amount of percentage of advertising revenue they get right now, that clearly means that there needs to be some sort of transparency which needs to be brought in.
Of course, indeed, INS has made out a very, very strong case as to why these tech giants, Google and Facebook, should share their revenue. If you just look at the figures, in terms of what they earned last year, Google earned about $182 billion. I mean, this is a huge amount of money purely from the news content that they are showcasing. And similarly, you look at Facebook. Facebook got about $86 billion. Now, this kind of money is a huge money, and entirely they are dependent on the content provided by the publishers world over, including India. Now, what has happened is initially we saw Google and Facebook take a very strident stand saying that, particularly under the US law, they have a right to what is called fair use of the content. Fair use is not the complete use of the content, but about snippets and headlines. And they also claim that it is they who bring the traffic to these news websites. But of late, what has happened is the Google's practice has been, that a user need not actually go to that particular content website. He can almost get a lot of information from the Google itself, from what the Google displays. Therefore, the publishers have made a case, as Mr. Mathew was saying, look, there is a lot of financial cost involved in generating news. And if that news content is being monetized by Google, it's very fair that it be shared. Now, already we have seen in Australia what has happened, you see. Just as the Australian government took a strong stand, in fact, the Australian Prime Minister spoke to our Prime Minister too, and said they were bringing a law where they would, straight away leave it to the arbitrator to decide. That is, under the Australian law, it was proposed that, the Google could perhaps state a particular fee and the publisher could state a fee. And the appointed arbitrator could just fix the sum. Now, once they realize that Australian government has taken a strong stand, now Google has already started entering into a business discussions with the Australian publishers. Similar thing is happening in Canada, and we have seen after the European Union passed a law in 2019, the France has already taken the first step, and already the Google is engaging the French publishers, which goes to show somewhere along the Google realizes that the publishers have a strong case. And the case is that, look, if you are monetizing what we are publishing, you better share the cost. Now, I do not know whether the 85% that the INS says would be the right amount, would be the final stage where the negotiations can be held. But definitely it's a fair case where the Indian publishers too must be compensated by tech giants like Google.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Prashant Mali here as well. Mr. Mali, from your point of view, is this a fair case which is being made out by INS here in India, and the way we've seen, laws being enacted elsewhere, specifically recently in Australia? Also, we would like to understand here in terms of, the way these digital tech giants work and where are the loopholes?
Now, let me tell you, as a lawyer and as looking at to the policy, what happens here is we need to have this digital broadcasting code. Without having this digital broadcasting code where we also be party to the other codes, now we may have some approximate mapping to our laws. When we have this, because then only these tech giants will understand that they need to bow down to our law. It is the same case what happened right now with this IT rules 2021. When the moment we drafted the rules, they started making changes in their policy. Until and unless we make the law, they are not going to heed to our request or letters what we send to them, because they feel they are the giants and they can rule. They have the content, they have the viewership, and they want to bulldoze our all whatever we do. What happens in other countries, they even wherever they have been shown their place, like even in countries like Argentina and Brazil, they are sharing their revenue with a few content providers. And but in India, it's not the case. They have not come into agreement with. So once we have the law, or again same rules under the original act of Press Trust Act, or under the IT Act 2000, once we formulate the rules under the law, and when they are responsible towards the newspapers, then they'll definitely come on table and start sharing, and the amount also can be fixed. So there is no hanky panky about sharing the revenue with this newspapers, because the content is been produced by Indian content providers. And the fun with Indian content providers is we are hugely providing with vernacular languages. It's in French, or in France, or in UK. It's only English or French. But in India, there are huge amount of content coming in different languages, and there is readership to every kind of content. So
Okay.
content, language-based content redemption should be there in the law, which should be enacted as fast as we can.
Okay. Okay, definitely. Mr. Mathew, would you agree to this part there that, just writing letters or, trying to negotiate with these tech giants might not be the only way out? Sort of a unified law here is required. And perhaps, do you also agree that the law which has been passed by the Australian Parliament recently, or the other such laws which exist elsewhere in some European countries, they can be the model laws, or we can try and take some portions from there and use them in the Indian context?
Probably a mixture of both. See, Australia and the European Union have addressed this in two separate ways. In Australia, it's the new news media bargaining code, where they're sort of saying that X percentage of your revenues have to be shared with content providers. They're not getting into the copyright aspect of it. In the European Union, for example, in France, they've recognized neighboring rights. So what neighboring rights means is that the link or the snippet which appears online, the French courts have recognized that that belongs to the publisher, and the publisher can get compensation for that. So that's how two different ways of looking at it. Now, in India, we've started this process. So we have to wait and see how best to go forward. I mean, we are hopeful that Google will be very sort of proactive and come back and come up with a mechanism to compensate all publishers. So, if you look at other parts of the world also, things are changing. I mean, I think newspapers and other content creators are negotiating in different ways. So as Advocate Mali said, I think it has to come in some form. I mean, main thing is to recognize that the content belongs to the Indian publisher, or any publisher for that matter, and that there is a value for that. And what we are asking is a fair value.
Okay, indeed. Mr. Iyer, would you agree that, a comprehensive law being put in place, as you were pointing out earlier, the examples of the Australian law or some European nations as well, would then, put in place a mechanism wherein all these loopholes which are exploited by the tech giants will not be possible, and the domestic, news outlets, specifically the newspapers or other content generating platforms, will get their due?
When you have a law, a law or a model like on the lines of Australia, then the compliance, forcing compliance is easier, because otherwise it's rather some kind of a loose arrangement. Of course, even our publishers would like to have the business model of directly negotiating with Google, because it will not be easier to fix one particular rate at which a payment should be made for all the publishers, because the cost involved in each of these publishing houses is different. So therefore, there could be a case for a business model. But I agree with Prashantji when he says, if you have a law or if you have a code, then there is some kind of a pressure on these tech giants, because otherwise they feel footloose to do what they want. So I think there should be a mixture where the companies, the publishers will be free to negotiate with the Google and fix a rate. At the same time, there would be a general code or a law that will make it very clear to these tech giants that if they have to do business in India, and if they are making money out of their business in India, then they will have to share as per the content usage, as per the copyright liability that is involved. I think that would be a fair model that would satisfy both our publishers, and that should be fine for a company that is very keen for the business outcomes from India.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Mali, that model which we're talking about, which you also referred to, and both Mr. Mathew and Mr. Iyer is also referring to. In your, wisdom, how do you think it could work around, and what can be the key aspects there, specifically if you're looking at Indian perspective here?
There could be different kind of content provider. One could be local content provider, one could be national content provider. There are different beats in which how the whole media operates. So it could be divided beat wise, it could be divided localized way, it could be divided topic wise. And as he rightly said, that it could be based on the amount of content or the quality of the content or the experience of the content provider. It could be different business model worked out based on this either INS as their representative body, or the people who understand this industry very well. The extracts could be taken out of them, and it could be made suited to Indian conditions, because Indian media as a whole is not exactly like what this Western media or foreign media is. We have a different way of looking at the news and content, and our content is different. Content is viewed differently from different platforms. So everything could be thought of, and a very Indianized version of this Australian code can be generated, or Article 11 and 12, which European Union uses it. So based on Article 11 and Article 12, which they started using it in 2019 onwards. So based on that 11 and 12 model, also we can make some rules. So we are in compliance with the rest of the world too.
Okay, and what do you make of these announcements which are coming in from tech giants, specifically Google and Facebook, saying that they are going to invest into the local news industries? What do we make out of these moves, business moves, which are being made by them? Are they just trying to placate the authorities, or they're just trying to mend fences, or maybe this has a larger meaning to overall this tussle going on between both sides over the advertising revenue?
See, I feel the law should come very fast, or they will, try to bulldoze our efforts. And what they'll try to do is they may buy certain establishments, they may invest into this news aggregators, or they will find out loopholes from where they'll get content and which will be a copyrighted content for them. So our other news providers will lose on it, because we have a lot of sharing agreements. This news providers also have sharing agreements with other news providers. So they may get the lowest part, the lowest person where he extracts the news, and he'll try to get it, because these are people with money, and these are people with diplomatic power, which comes from the US channel. So to secure US businesses, they can go at any length. To stop this, we need to have law, and law very fast. So that acts as an enabler to our Indian business houses, Indian news media producers and news media houses, which are authentic news providers, content providers. If we go slow on this, they will definitely try to use their muscle power and buy out certain some entities in India, and then they will have copyright related laws in their favor from which they can extract. So we need to act fast. That's the keyword today.
Okay, definitely acting fast is the keyword today. Let's have one concluding comment each from Mr. Iyer as well as Mr. Mathew here on a related aspect, Mr. Mathew, and you referred to it earlier in your first response as well, that when we're talking about this revenue sharing model, it not only takes care of the money factor or the revenue which the original content producers need to be given, but also it takes care of the copyright aspect and most importantly the fake news aspect.
Absolutely. See, there are 2 points in this. One, compensate for the editorial content which we put forth, and the fake news issue is, see, for example, if you do a Google search for something in Delhi, typically the most credible news sites should come up, Times of India, HT, and sites like that. But if there are these obscure sites which come, which are not credible, then that is a big problem. I mean, it's a huge issue. But I think Google has done a lot in the past year to ensure that those don't happen as often as it used to before. But going forward, credibility is important, and it's only credible news which needs to be propagated.
Okay, definitely. Mr. Iyer, your concluding comments there?
No, there is one aspect which I thought which that should be mentioned in a debate like this, which is, our Indian news publishers have largely been, doing their work in terms of public spirited, in the sense that a lot of content today is available free of cost to the web users. And of course, there are some financial dailies which have gone for some premium content to be, to be showcased on the basis of payment. But largely, the reader or the viewer, I mean, of the web, the consumer of the web news is a person who doesn't have to pay much. In fact, unless it's a very premium content. See, unlike in the West, if you look at some of the big newspaper chains, they have got all their content under this, paywall. That is not the case in India. So therefore, I think that it is very important that tech giants, for the sake of the vast Indian readers who get bulk of their reading material free of cost, that they should compensate the Indian publishers. That's important, because Indian publishers are largely still following the public spirited journalism as a model, because they are yet to, of course, in many cases they are gradually, because of the huge financial costs involved and also the stress that they have undergone during the pandemic and the post-pandemic, and before that, the slowdown in economy. So that is why I feel that it is also in the interest of vast, number of Indian readers and users that the Google compensates the publishers so that the readers themselves are not burdened. Because otherwise, what would happen is the publishing companies will be forced to, bring more of their content under the paywall.
Okay, definitely. That is a sort of a, circle or cycle which needs to be broken there. Thank you so much, Mr. Shekhar Iyer, Mr. Mathew, as well as Mr. Prashant Mali, for sharing your views on this very important aspect and the ongoing tussle between Google and the news outlets over revenue sharing, the advertising revenue sharing. And it's very crucial to understand all the aspects. And as our panelists were pointing out, it is really, really important that India may also consider bringing in a law on the same lines as Australia has now, and some of the European countries as well, so that all these aspects can be taken care of and the loopholes which are utilized by the tech giants may be also taken care of. Thank you so much for watching Rajya Sabha Television. We'll come back again on Monday with a different topic. Till then, keep watching RSTV.